Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
How do you stop feeling overwhelmed by all the decisions you have to make to keep your business running? That's exactly what Bob will be diving into today's podcast. He'll be sharing practical strategies from his latest book, Overcoming Overwhelm, including how to reduce decision fatigue, avoid the multitasking trap, reclaim your time, and lead your team with clarity without burning out. Bob Wendover is from Common Sense Enterprises and brings over 37 years of experience as a business owner, researcher, and speaker. He's an award-winning author of 13 books, including Figure It Out, High Performance Hiring, and Crossing the Generational Divide. His insights have guided a wide range of Fortune 500 companies. His latest release, Overcoming Overwhelm, offers a refreshingly practical roadmap to reclaiming time, energy, and focus by mastering everyday decision-making. Bob, welcome. Do you have a favorite quote or saying, sir?
That's an interesting question. I do collect a lot of quotes. One of the ones I have here on my wall is, as I look back on my life, I realized that every time I thought I was being rejected from something good, I was actually being redirected to something better.
That sounds really good. You've been researching decision-making in the workplace. Why do you make a choice and how do you follow through? What's happened in the last 5 years?
One of the biggest challenges we're facing right now is an overdependence on technology to make decisions, when in reality, technology doesn't make a decision for us. It provides us with options and possible answers. This is especially true of young people who have grown up, the digital natives who have come of age with a phone in their hands and immediately look to some sort of outside source. And those who have been around for a while recognize that when you make a decision, you have to live with the consequences. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, and you've got to learn how to deal with whatever the outcome happens to be. As we've seen through numerous surveys over the past couple of years, employers are growing hesitant to hire individuals in their early 20s. You're not quite sure if they're comfortable making independent decisions, and you certainly don't have the time to babysit them. And I realize that in saying that, there's somebody out there who's 21 right now who's becoming apoplectic because that's not that person. But we see too much evidence where there's smoke, there's fire.
So in your book, you talk about starting at the margins. What does that mean?
Wayne, what I mean is that you want to start with the little stuff. Change is a tough thing for anybody because the brain likes safety. We are a product of the habits and routines that we have developed. If you go online and search on how to solve burnout, what you get in a lot of cases is eat a better diet, spend more time with family, maintain balance, which is true in a theoretical sense, but start small, because making small adjustments to our schedules, making small adjustments to what we do by eliminating unnecessary tasks, unnecessary routines, is the best place to start, because the brain is not going to fight us as much on that type of thing. It's the reason why New Year's resolutions don't work, because we go out there and try to make too many changes at once, and the brain's going to fight us, because anytime we try to change something like that, the brain is introducing conflict. It doesn't like uncertainty.
So as people make decisions, they're at a certain point in time, if you work a 12-hour day and now you get into your 16th hour, your body says, "Oh, boss, what are you thinking?" In the mind space, what does fatigue look like and how can it show up?
Fatigue takes a number of different forms. I always look at the behavior. I listen to two things. As I'm working with a team or talking with a team leader about how to detect it, it comes down to behavior such as the individual who's very detail-oriented, who seems to be dropping the ball. The person who's always on time and ready with the projects, who is not following through the way they used to. The person who is lashing out at individuals when they're generally a happy, go-along person, and all of a sudden they're snapping at people. You don't hear anybody in the workplace generally saying, "Boy, am I burned out." It's more about the behaviors, or it's comments in meetings where somebody who's generally a productive soul starts making sardonic or sarcastic comments saying, "Oh, not this again," or things that are going to be more negative in their approach. If people want to go on my website, there is a type of behaviors. It's not complete by any means, but it's one of the resources there.
I'd like you to tell me about the myth of multitasking.
Wayne, multitasking is a myth. About 15 years ago, a Microsoft researcher named Linda Stone coined the term time slicing. What we perceive as multitasking is, in fact, time slicing. The brain can only attend to one thing at a time. Yes, I can have the dishwasher running, the copier going, and be on the phone. But if the dishwasher starts flooding or the copier starts smoking, my attention goes to whatever that emergency is. I can't attend to the person on the phone and fix the dishwasher at the same time. And that's the thing that people miss. So yes, you can multitask in that sense, but when it comes to attention, the brain, the short-term memory flushes every 6 seconds, and it can only deal with about 5 or 6 attributes at the same time, including things like if I'm talking to you, Wayne, and I'm looking at your appearance, I'm evaluating you in that sense. The temperature in the room where I am, part of that stimuli, and one element of that is what you're saying. Now, if you're saying something and I start thinking of how I'm going to respond, all of a sudden I'm paying more attention to what I'm doing than what you're saying. Or if I am talking with you and my smartphone vibrates in my pocket, I start paying attention to that and I end up saying to you, I'm sorry, I missed what you were saying. So the brain can only attend to one thing at a time. And that's not really multitasking. So what's the solution? Staying focused on one thing at a time. The best leaders work on one thing, finish it, and move on to the next. If they can't finish it, they compartmentalize it and say, okay, I'm going to move on to the next task until I have the resource or the question answered.
One of the ways to avoid making bad decisions is stop making decisions. Tell me more about that.
One of my global premises is to say to people, we make 35,000 decisions per day, according to most research. One of the keys is to reduce the number of decisions for 2 reasons. Number one, it releases mental energy. It gives us an opportunity to spend more time on the stuff that's really important. And it also stops sapping the physical energy. I talk about micro decisions a lot. If you're sitting at a traffic light and you're scrolling through your social media, every single one of those posts that you see, your brain has to decide in a microsecond whether or not you're going to watch it or listen to it or whether you're going to scroll to the next one. And in the space of maybe a minute and a half waiting for a long light, you might make 200 or 300 decisions like that. Each one of those costs you a bit of the blood glucose. If you do it in the morning because you have a habit of checking social media and emails by the time you get to the office, you feel like the edge is off of your energy or focus. That's the reason why. You have to be careful about that as you go through. The fewer decisions you make, the more energy and focus you have for making the ones that really count. People will have that fear of missing out. I don't want to miss anything that the boss said or that the team said. Chances are, if it's important, they'll repeat it. If you're able to compartmentalize that and let it go, that's probably a better strategy.
I remember a time driving a familiar route, same time of day. I get there and I'm going, you know what? I forgot about a whole segment of the drive. Obviously, the vehicle arrived on time without injury. I didn't find anything added to the vehicle that shouldn't have been there. And it's almost like muscle memory. Do you find that we compartmentalize our day, the kind of multitasking, like putting in a PIN number on a keypad? I no longer think of the numbers. It's like the finger does this and this. And then meanwhile, I'm talking to somebody. When do you decide, or assuming no one's in harm's way, when do you decide, hang on, the volume's too much? How do you stop? This should be someone else doing this task, or I got to break up my time. How do you decide when that's the ideal time to go, I'm overloading myself?
A lot of it has to do with mindset. Small business owners especially are control freaks. Raise your hand if you're a control freak, and pretty much all the small business owners will raise their hands because we want to control everything. It's important to be able to take a step back and say, I have to trust. I have to let other people do things. It's a change in mindset. I have a virtual assistant who lives in the Philippines, and she's the one who makes those changes. Why? Partially because if I take the time to do it, I'm taking my focus away from something more important that only I can do. I'm wasting her time and my money if I'm not giving her the stuff that she should be doing. But it takes mindset to make that kind of a change. The unfortunate part is that it's all based on neural pathways. I feel comfortable making changes to my website. I'm proud that I can get on WordPress and do what I need to do. I need to compartmentalize that and say, okay, that's done. It takes time to make those changes because neural pathways are basically the basis behind a habit. So what do? You don't erase habits, as the myth says. No, what you do is you override a habit with a different habit. You override a bad habit with another routine of some sort. People who go around saying, I don't smoke anymore, end up smoking again anyway. Instead, they've got to find something to replace it.
You talk about tactics. What are 2 or 3 low-hanging fruits that give you a quick win?
I'll give you a few, Wayne, and I'm going to tell you the numbers so people can go buy the book and look at all 114. One of them that comes up all the time is number 23, and that is the phrase, I have another commitment. That has saved me hours over the years. Because if I'm in a meeting where I don't need to be, or a conversation I don't need to have, or I'm just wasting, somebody else is wasting my time for whatever reason, I can say, I'm sorry, I have another commitment. And that person universally will say, oh, okay. Now, the truth is, in how many years that I've been doing that, no one has ever said to me, what's the other commitment? So I can sit in a meeting where it's a waste of time, and I can lean over to the person next to me and just say, I'm sorry, I have another commitment. And if anybody asks that person where Bob went, that person will say, well, he has another commitment. So that's one of the simple things to do. But I always say it in an apologetic way, because that way it's not like I'm boasting about it. I'm not saying, hey, I'm getting out of this stupid meeting. I'm sorry, we got another commitment. Number 37, I've got them written down here because I wanted to be prepared. Number 37, for instance, was resist the temptation to jump in. You get into a meeting, a group of friends, a conversation with your boss and maybe a boss's colleague, and they're having a conversation and what they're talking about sounds interesting. And all of a sudden you jump in and you don't need to. You don't need to contribute. Just let them talk. And that gives you the opportunity to back out of whatever's going on by saying, oh, I have another commitment. So we have to resist sometimes, I just want to talk to you for a couple of minutes. And the person says, oh, okay. And all of a sudden it's 10 minutes gone. So we have to be careful. A third one would be set a time frame on meetings, on meeting topics. Put it on the agenda. When you send a meeting agenda out to your team, and you should be sending an agenda out rather than just saying, hey, we're going to get together every Monday from 10 to 11. That's a disaster waiting to happen. Instead, say, okay, we have 3 topics this time, and the first topic is going to take 11 minutes. Make it an unusual number. And the second topic is going to be 7 minutes. It sends a message to people to be prepared when they show up. And if you send the context to everybody ahead of time, people are up to speed as opposed to you having to spend time explaining it. And people keep a clock on stuff. This one's not in the book, but it's going to go in the next edition. Hard stop. You can say to somebody, I have a hard stop in about 15 minutes. They will keep time for you because they want to respect your time. They will tell you when the 15 minutes is up. I use that all the time as well.
Something that interests me, Bob, is you yourself was in the trenches. Tell me about going from the trenches to the learning and processing. What did Bob do as the journeyman?
I've been conducting seminars for 37 years. And in preparation for those presentations, regardless of the setting, I always interview people ahead of time. I'm an avid biography reader, and I'm always looking for what other people are doing, not the big stuff, but the little stuff that saves them time, saves them energy, and so on. That's where this came from. And I finally got to a point where I thought, after 3,000 interviews, let me see where the patterns are. What I did was I gathered all of those, I wrote a paragraph about each one. And then I said they really break into different categories: meeting issues, interacting with other issues, technology, work environment types of little tactics, and so on. As a result of that, I was able to just come up with, in this particular edition, 114. I now have another 25 or 30 that'll go in the next edition. The numbering is not priority. It's just a way to identify them. I started listing them when it turned out to be 114.
Does size matter when you're having a meeting? The number of people present?
Pretty much all the research indicates that at 7 people, the meeting starts to degrade. So for several reasons. Number one, there's a lot of individuals who will not necessarily speak up because somebody else said what they were thinking. Number two, it's hard to corral 12 people in the side conversations. One of the things that I say to people is really think hard when you put a meeting together as to who really needs to be there. Because if you simply invite everybody because you think you're going to get more ideas, for the most part, you're going to get duplicative ideas. You're not necessarily going to get more ideas.
Is that not a seminar then, as opposed to a meeting?
Yeah. And good leaders, People who run the best meetings are facilitators. They're the individuals who pick on people and say, what do you think? If somebody is not participating, not out of some sort of, got to get everybody in line, but becoming a good observer. As facilitators are good observers. So you ask open-ended questions. I just read a good book I'd recommend to everybody called The Friction Project, written by Robert Sutton and Huggy Rao. Came out in 20...
Did you say the first name?
Yes, Hugggy. He's a professor at Stanford University.
It's all good. I'm just being the editor of the podcast. It's going to come across, and I'm going to see Huggy, and I'm going.
Yeah, it really is. It's one of the best books I've read in a long time. The premise behind the book is there are things we do, decisions we make that are too easy, and we end up creating a problem. There are also decisions that are too hard that we need to make easier. If somebody's interested, they can read that book. It's a great book. Part of what they talk about in that book is the fact that people spend way too much time in meetings trying to decide things, when in a lot of cases, the meeting isn't necessary in the first place. You might send an email to someone instead of having a meeting and saying, let me collect all the information first. And then if I really do need to have a meeting to make the final decision, great. If not, I can look at the 10 or 12 people I sent the meeting out to, got their feedback. If I see a pattern, then that's the way I should go. And that saves everybody a lot of time.
Decision traps. What are they?
I focus on small decision traps. And one of them is this. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a big to-do list kind of person because of the organization. It's that warm, fuzzy feeling I get when I cross something off. But that said, it's very easy sometimes to start doing all the little decisions rather than focusing on the one that really is most important. And so I do all the little stuff and I rationalize, I got that done and I got that done and I got that done. The problem is I didn't get the big thing done, and the big thing ends up getting pushed to the next day because I ran out of time or energy. So while it's important sometimes to give yourself a little bit of a win in the morning that says, I'm going to do A, B, C, or D, that's great. But then get on with what you need to do. What's your biggest issue? Solve that first. Or what is the most uncomfortable? And solve that. I make daily contacts. I make 5 phone calls a day. And I send 5 emails a day to prospects about conducting seminars. The truth is that takes me about 15, 20 minutes. It doesn't take that long, but it's also calling strangers. And we all as humans have that thing about, gee, I don't want to call strangers. I get past that by just doing it. It's a habit at this point, and then I can cross it off my list.
You make a point about taking time to reflect and thinking about things. Do you find that you can end up getting into a loop where you end up getting paralyzed if you're reviewing something you've done or a process that you have? Some people get caught up in analysis paralysis, and that's not the goal. You want to have time to reflect. How do you sort that out so that you don't jam yourself up, but at the same time, you can review what's happened?
A couple of thoughts on that. One would be write down, record what you're thinking, record your reasoning. If I record my reasoning, then I can go back to it 2-3 weeks later or whenever, and I can remind myself why I made the decision that I made. Too often, something comes up that is associated with it that could make it better, or here's somebody that said, I'm doing it this way, and then I start drifting in that direction. I have a sign on my wall, NBSO, no bright, shiny objects. Because too often, especially bright, creative people say, that's a great idea. He's doing it over there. It maybe works for him, but what are you going to give up if you choose to go in that direction? Well, you have to have some reasoning to go back to it. If you've written it down, you say, this is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. The second part is you got to make a decision and you got to live with the consequences. Most research that I've seen says if you have 70% of what you think you need to make a decision, pull the trigger. You're never going to have it all. You could waste a whole bunch of time trying to get that final 10% of data that you think you need, when in reality, that's just a waste of energy.
Are there industries that lead into overwhelm? Are any of them industry specific?
Dangerous would be emergency services and healthcare right now. That's where we see the greatest incidence of burnout, because those individuals feel called, even when they're tired and fatigued, they can't give up. Especially in certain times of the year or certain circumstances, healthcare is desperately short of good people at this point on the healthcare delivery side, nurses, physicians, radiology techs, and they work long hours and then they go home and they're thinking about their cases, so they can't put their minds to sleep. Healthcare is really in a mess across the world. You can go to the UK, Canada, US. There is just a shortage of well-trained people. They're so devoted. Education is another one. Emergency medicine, emergency response. Firefighters and fire response would be another good example. Anything that has to do with an urgency of that nature.
Emotional intelligence. We hear about IQ, but E is a different puppy. If you have a really good EQ, you get a sense of how much time you have, how much time someone else has, understanding the other person, etc. How do you impart that information to somebody? Let me tune you up. Not as in give me a smack upside the head, what were you thinking? As opposed to let me guide you here and look for these signs. How do you enlighten them? And that's
one of the things that I see these leaders do is set parameters. They compel people. I love the word compel because compel means you set a clear expectation that people will perform in a particular way. I'll give you a great example. I interviewed Lisa, the chief operating officer of a large defense contractor in the United States. She oversees 12,000 people, works 5 days a week, 10 hours a day. She breaks her days into 40 10-minute or 15-minute chunks. If you get on her calendar, you get 15 minutes or 30 minutes. She is very disciplined around that. So as an example, she said, for instance, I've assigned 2 15-minute blocks to this interview and accomplished 2 things at the same time. 1, she illustrated her process, but 2, she also diplomatically let me know that at 29 minutes, she was going to end our interview, so I had better be concise and prepared. But she can do the same thing with others, and she has set a standard to the people who report to her that if you get on her calendar, you better be precise. She said, nothing drives me nuts more than the person who comes in unprepared, asks a 13-minute question and asks me to make a decision in 2 minutes. So she said, if you want to send me information ahead of time so that I can review it and I'm prepared, or you want to come in and spend the first 2 minutes asking the question and maybe providing some options so that we can discuss, that's great. But please don't waste my time. You won't get on my calendar again. Now, she's in a very powerful position compared to most, but you can still do that within a team just by setting that kind of an expectation. Let's get to the point. I've talked to leaders who have sat down with their teams and said, okay, here are the 3 or 4 expectations. If you're going to come to me with something and it's complicated, send me an email ahead of time and put the context in the email, including links, for instance, if you have some material you want me to read ahead of time. I can do that much faster than you explaining it. Number 2, tell me what the actual question is or what the decision is that need to be made. And number 3, provide me with the options. Tell me what would you do and what other options might be available. If we can do that, we're going to be very efficient and it trains other individuals. And if you're the team leader, you can do that.
Person is trying to build a car or large electrical plant. They may have a huge team. These consortiums, is there a size that more than 12 people gets lost and that we should be tearing down companies instead of building them?
To me, the most effective organizations are where there are a series of teams, it's well organized, and there are very clear demarcations about responsibility, authority, decision-making, and resources. Jamie Dimon, who runs JP Morgan and has for now, 20 years or something like that, he's a great example of that. He wouldn't be in that position if he wasn't very good at what he does. I've become a big fan of all of the interviews that he does because he is rather upfront. One of the things that he has said is, I assign authority. And if a person doesn't take that authority and run with it, they're probably not the person who should be in that position because I've given them the authority because I trust them. We set parameters, we set outcomes, we set goals. But if that doesn't happen, I want to know why they're not exerting their own authority. I want to know what I can do to either coach them or replace them when they're having trouble making decisions. You can be in an organization of 50 that's got 7 or 8 teams of 7 or 8 people. You can do the same thing and say, I've got a span of control of 7 people. Each one of those people manages 7 people. That's 49 people. So I don't meet with the front line. I want to be accessible to them if they have an issue. I'm going to wander around the organization every once in a while so they know I'm there. But when it comes to decision-making, it's those 7 people that I've assigned as team leaders who are going to run with my authority and make the decisions they need to.
The size of the company implies that not everybody's going to be the same age or from the same era. What are the influences in the age demographic that influence making good decisions? Is it better in one age, or is it the person themselves, a certain type, like an introvert, extrovert?
I think generations plays a role just simply because of the time in which everybody came of age. People our age, for instance, came with much more of a top-down type of leadership. Younger people are a lot more informed about collaboration, not necessarily flatter organizations, but they feel comfortable challenging, expressing their concerns and so on, because they've seen so much more of it in the media. They can watch a video on how this organization does what they do. Older individuals were taught to be more obedient. You show up before the boss comes in the morning and you don't go home till the boss leaves the parking lot in the afternoon. That's just not realistic anymore. People in their 50s and 60s especially still have that wiring, but that runs in conflict with the individual who says, why do we need to come in the first place? Why can't I just work out of my house? Why can't I be just, and that's one of the issues we're dealing with right now is task orientation, which is what the boomers especially grew up with, is not as relevant as it used to be. It's about outcome. I'm going to give you parameters, a deadline, an outcome, and a time frame. Perform. And if you need me, come to me. But if you come to me asking for permission decisions where, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, what do you think? I'm going to turn around on you and say, I gave you the authority. What are you going to do? People are afraid to make decisions in that sense. Older individuals are not so much that. They've learned over time what to do, and younger individuals, not so much. As I mentioned at the top of the program, that's one of the issues that managers are dealing with right now of, Seth Godin said, people don't make decisions out of a fear of failure. They make decisions out of a fear of blame. I think that's very true.
Micromanagers and macro managers. Now, the other part of the equation is the person who's guiding the ship, hand on the helm, so to speak. You've just described a macro manager as the ideal fit, not the micromanager. So how do you get someone out of the weeds? Not hands off the wheel, let the wheel go by itself, because the wheel has, the autopilot's not necessarily an autopilot, but it has its own capacity. How do you get them shift over to macro management?
I think it depends upon the circumstance. If you are in a large organization, that person would need coaching. I did some work in the grocery industry back in the 1990s. One of the things that used to happen is you take a produce manager who does a phenomenal job, gets promoted to assistant manager, and then goes to that new store as an assistant manager. And it runs amok because they're afraid to make decisions in a new environment. So they start micromanaging the produce department. That produce department looks amazing, but it's driving that produce manager nuts out of micromanagement. The individual is afraid to get out of their depth in other parts, whether it's the front end or dry grocery. That's a leadership issue. Up to the leader further up the food chain, it's the responsibility of leadership to say to an assistant manager, we're going to coach you. We're going to talk about what's working, what's not working, and compel you to get out of your depth. We're going to talk about hiring, staffing, community relations, and all the other stuff an assistant manager might be involved with. So from a larger organization standpoint, it's really coaching in that sense. In a smaller organization where the top dog is micromanaging, if they are open to the idea, it means finding a mentor, maybe who's running a similar organization or a local organization or someone you find through the Chamber of Commerce. If you have the resources, it might be joining an organization such as Vistage, where you meet with somebody who has been where you are and is able to coach you on a monthly basis and meet with peers. So it really depends upon the circumstances.
I've seen in some large organizations the type of quiet quitting, where talented people have decided that you own my arms and legs, but you no longer interest me. How do you see as a senior manager that your organization is there?
That's one of the biggest challenges that organizations are facing right now, partially because of what happened at the beginning of COVID, where everybody went home and now you have a group of individuals who don't want to come back. I think a lot of that started with just the evolution of COVID. We sent everybody home and then people didn't want to come back. And they said, why should I spend 45 minutes each way driving in the car and so on? We have a lot of individuals who want to work in a hybrid situation. Jamie Dimon says everybody should come back into the office 5 days a week. The reality is that the quiet quitting issue is sometimes not giving people enough work to do. Measuring outcome is a really hard thing to do sometimes. If the person is doing what they've been told to do and they can do it in 35 hours as opposed to 40, you have to be careful about saying, okay, I'm going to add another thing to your list just so that I'm taking up all 40 hours. Because then they're thinking, if I figure out how to do that in 37 and a half hours, you're going to add another little thing and that's going to burn me out. Okay, so this is delicate balance, but it's about outcome. It's about being clear. Too many managers, they're sustainers. They say, this is what we do. This is how we do it. I just hired you. You're going to do this. I used to do it, and it took me 40 hours. So this is what you're going to do. They become resentful when the person figures out how to do it in 5 or 7 hours less, or can do it remotely. That creates a cynicism on the part of the worker who says, if you're going to make me do make work types of things just to keep me busy, I'm going to find another opportunity.
So have you ever worked with a company that they only had to make a few changes and everything was right as rain? You only provided a slight tweak as opposed to, listen, we have to overhaul. You're micromanaging too much. Your meetings are too long, too large. They're not meetings, they're seminars. Realize the intent and purpose. Have you ever come across a company where it's just light tweaking or the other way around?
The companies that execute well are few and far between. They hire me to come in and help them. I have a philosophy that I'm responsible to my audience, not for them. You can pay me to teach you what other companies are doing better, but if you don't adopt those strategies, I can't be responsible for that. That's part of the reason I resist the idea of consulting sometimes, because you pay me a lot of money, nothing changed. That's probably on you, not on me. Let's put our cards on the table. Good leaders are the first people to turn to others and ask for help, get some coaching themselves. We'll get together with a CEO group and say, here's my issue and what can I do about it? I've worked with a number of affinity groups where a group in an industry gets together and they're spread across the country so they don't compete with each other, but they all deal with the same type of equipment or service. So they're all dealing with the same types of challenges in different geographic areas. What's cool to sit down with them, they're typically executives, owners, they say, this is my issue. And they have a round table and they say, okay, what do you do? And what do you do? And how did you solve this? They take that back if they think it works for their organization. They meet 4 or 5 times a year. Part of it's social and part of business. They have relationships and people they can trust, that they can throw something against the wall and see what happens.
You mentioned Mr. Diamond, and there's certainly others, probably Steve Jobs is most famous. How do you energize a workplace, especially one that's de-energized?
That's a seminar in itself.
There's a rabbit that comes with a battery, the energizer.
Yeah, exactly. I think it starts out with assessment, Wayne. What's going on? What's not working? Are we talking about efficiency? Are we talking about mistakes? Are we talking about turnover, employee turnover? Are we talking about a lack of passion on the part of leadership or a lack of disorganization on the part of leadership? I'm a product of the era in conducting things where the CEO goes to a conference and here's a speaker and the speaker speaks very eloquently and the guy says, oh, he's got a great book. And so the president buys 10,000 books and gives everybody a copy. They say, now we're going to go in this direction. And then the next year he goes to another conference. Here's another speaker, buys another 10,000 books and says, now we're going to go in this direction. And after a while, nobody takes him seriously. It's a culture thing more than anything else, but it begins with assessment. It begins with sitting down and saying, what's going wrong? What's going right? And talking to the front line and saying, if you want to change this. That's one of the things the guys who wrote the Friction Project talked about was get down on the front line, talk to people and say, what would you fix? Because a lot of times they have the answers because they're living it as opposed to supervising it or leading it.
It's interesting. I've worked in a large corporation and size matters, as in you can easily lost or the sense of purpose, or it was a hospital, a healthcare institution. The housekeeper didn't feel they were important, yet if they didn't do their job well, it affected the baseline of everything else. So you could have the most adept surgeon and the most adept treatment, but if the infection came in, it wreaks havoc. So having everybody aligned and working together is really.
I did some work with a network of 5 hospitals in Michigan. One person said to me, they have about hospital service. He said, one of the things that we struggle with is the quality of food because people remember the food more than they remember what actually happened to them and helped them heal. And how do we deal with that? Because that's unfair. The fact that you don't like the green Jell-O and you mark us down on our service because you didn't like the Jell-O, for heaven's sakes, that's unfair. But he said, unfortunately, patients have become customers more than patients sometimes.
Just as a side note regarding food. It seems to be a common denominator in most healthcare institutions. Someone in the nutrition department said, we can't always add salt because of your predicament. So some of the food is going to be bland. And
Yeah. It's kind of like airline pilots. I'm a million miler on United. And one of the things that always drives me nuts is if we're sitting on the tarmac and nothing is happening, how about just getting on the mic for about 2 minutes and saying, this is my predicament, rather than being silent? You've got 250 people behind you who are saying, now what? How about communicating? The same thing is true of physicians in a lot of cases. Give us a little bit more information. Give us a little bit of context, rather than just nodding and writing stuff on your laptop.
Bob, are there areas or industries that you enjoy working more than others? How do we get a hold of you?
I've worked with a variety of industries: grocery industry, electric utilities, mechanical industries such as mechanical contractors, building maintenance or building automation. I've done quite a bit of work there with pretty much every federal agency here in the United States at one point or another. It's more about whether I think I can make a positive difference than the organization itself or the industry itself. But if people want to get in contact with me, really the best thing to do is just shoot me an email and let's have a conversation. I'm one of those people that says, hey, take 20 minutes on my calendar and let's flesh out whether or not there's a match here. What can I do to help you? Send an email to bobw@commonsenseenterprises.net.
so, Bob, what would be the first tell for a company to reach out to you? If they take that moment to sit back, reflect, and going, let's analyze what's going on or what's not going on, what's one of the first indicators that they should be reaching out to you?
Turnover would be one of them. I can't keep my people, or I can't find the right people. Another part of it is people making mistakes, just feeling like the organization feels overwhelmed. What can we do? Or the people are not thinking on their feet. I have a program called How to Create a Think on Your Feet work environment. They're not afraid of failure. They're afraid of blame. So they don't make a decision. How can you create a culture where people feel comfortable making decisions, recognizing that not everything goes well, and how do you recover from it? And that's around confidence. It's around decision-making skill, but it's also around the coaching and support that's necessary for people to feel confident in what they're doing and feel passionate about what they're doing because they understand the bigger picture. One of the things that I've said to employers all the time is, I dare you to walk up to 10 random people in your organization and ask them, how does this place make money? Chances are pretty good you will be shocked. The average person doesn't know how the place makes money, what the business model is, how they fit into it. They just don't, because nobody has ever taken the time to set them down and say, this is the role that you play, and this is why it's essential in our organization, and this is the impact that it has. The average employer doesn't do that, and I think that's a tragedy.
Bob, I want to say thank you very much. Appreciate your time today. Wayne Pratt, being the co-host, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. If you're hitting that point in your business where there's turnover, people aren't making decisions, or they are making the wrong ones, there's error flaws all over the place, reach out to Bob.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Just Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motive 8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.